Berlin, 1979. A city cut in half, divided by ideologies, walls, and fears. On one side, the Communist East, led by East Germany and supported by the Soviet Union. On the other, the capitalist West, free, modern, and eager to prove its superiority not only military or economic, but also cultural and symbolic. In the midst of this silent clash, where architecture became a battlefield, a colossus stood. The ICC, Internationales Kongresszentrum Berlin. It was impossible to ignore it. At 320 meters long, 80 meters wide, and 40 meters high, its silhouette seemed out of place in time. To some, it was a futuristic aberration. To others, it was a spaceship that had landed on the western side of the city. That is why Berliners began to call it that. The spaceship. It was not just because of its metallic appearance, nor because of the red and blue lights that sparkled at night. It was because of what it represented, a statement. The ICC was conceived as the Western answer to the Palace of the Republic, the monumental building built by East Germany in the heart of East Berlin. While the East displayed its socialist architecture with pomp, luxury, and veiled oppression, the West wanted more. It wanted to make history, to show that freedom could also build, that democracy could build something even more impressive. And that is exactly what happened. Inaugurated with great fanfare, the ICC was at the time the largest convention center in Europe, a symbol of optimism, progress, and technology. More than a building, it was a manifesto, a silent provocation, made of steel and glass, addressed to the other side of the wall. Every line of its architecture screamed independence, boldness, and confidence in the future. It was the materialization of a Western dream in the midst of the Cold War. There, between busy highways and the relentless flow of the city, the colossal structure stood like a futuristic sentinel. From a distance, it looked like a cross between a space station and an intergalactic command center. Up close, it was even more impressive, a technological fortress with aggressive geometric shapes, sharp angles, and an almost intimidating presence. But behind the concrete and steel lay something else, a desperate desire to prove that the West was not just surviving, but flourishing. That despite the constant geopolitical tension, creativity and innovation still had a place. And that even surrounded by the fear of destruction, there was room to imagine and build a brighter future. The ICC was not just a feat of engineering, it was a message, a provocation, a promise. And for many Berliners, it was also a silent source of pride, proof that even when the city was wounded and divided, it could still dream big. Behind the monumentality of the ICC lay a mind, or rather two. Architects Ralph Schuler and Ursulina Schuyler-Witte did not just want to design a functional building. They wanted to create an experience, a self-sufficient organism, a symbol that would provoke both admiration and discomfort. And that is exactly what they achieved. Inspired by European brutalism and the high-tech aesthetic that was beginning to emerge in the late 1970s, they conceived something that had never been attempted on that scale. The result was a hybrid between a bunker, a spaceship, and a futuristic sculpture. The ICC didn't feel like part of Berlin. It didn't even feel like part of Earth. Its structure defied conventions, both visual and technical. The central idea was bold, to create a building within a building. In other words, an internal structure that was completely independent of the external one. This wasn't just aesthetic, it was functional. By soundproofing the interior, they were able to shield the conference halls from the deafening noise of the surrounding highways. Traffic could roar outside, while the inside was completely silent. This allowed for total control of sound, lighting, and temperature, something unheard of at the time. But it didn't stop there. The structure was suspended by gigantic steel trusses, as if the floors inside were floating in the void. The floors, walls, and even the ceiling of the main halls did not touch the base of the building. It was as if everything was levitating. The sensation of walking inside was almost surreal. Nothing vibrated. Nothing echoed. It was like being in an environment isolated from the world, controlled, precise, cold, and at the same time grand. The brutalist aesthetic was manifested in the gray surfaces, the raw shapes, the straight lines, and the abrupt curves. It was an uncompromising architecture, designed to impress with its strength, not its beauty. But there was beauty there, a strange, almost alien beauty. The endless corridors, the metal panels, the angular windows. Everything was reminiscent of a technological utopia, a future that only existed in science fiction films. And that was the intention. Behind the scenes of the project, the architects wanted more than functionality. They wanted to create a setting, a space that would provoke, that would disorient, that would make the visitor feel part of something bigger. And they succeeded. Upon entering the ICC, the visitor had the clear sensation of crossing a border, leaving the present and entering an undefined time, where common logic did not apply. Every detail was designed to reinforce this sensation, from the lighting to the corridors, including the geometric shapes that seemed to bend the space. Nothing there was casual. Every corner said, "You are no longer in Berlin. You are somewhere else, in another era, in another world." And for those who lived in the daily tension of a divided city, this was, paradoxically, a relief, a futuristic refuge in the midst of ideological warfare. Inside the ICC, there was something even more impressive than its futuristic facade. A beating heart made of light, steel, and absolute silence. The main conference hall. Designed to hold up to 5,000 people, it was not just an auditorium, it was an engineering spectacle. The floor was movable, the ceiling was suspended, and the walls were covered with an acoustic system that made it seem as if time stood still inside. The suspension system was worthy of a spaceship. The entire room floated, supported by enormous steel trusses. It didn't touch the ground. It was not part of the base of the building. It was as if it were hovering, separate from everything and protected from everything. This was not just aesthetic, it was technical. Insulated from external vibrations, the room managed to maintain absolute silence, even with heavy traffic just a few meters away. It was like stepping into a capsule. But the real impact came from the combination of technology and sensation. Above the main hall was an installation called the Brain, a structure of intertwined neon lights that simulated synapses, nerve fibers, and electrical impulses. When illuminated in red and blue, it created the illusion of a living mind operating above the heads of the participants. It was more than just decoration. It was a symbol of intelligence, of progress, of control. A visual reminder that this space was intended as a command center for the future. Every detail was functional and symbolic at the same time. The movable floor allowed the space to be adapted for events ranging from medical conferences to futuristic concerts. The acoustics allowed people to speak clearly without a microphone, even in a crowded room. And the lighting, designed to guide visitors without confusing them, created an almost hypnotic atmosphere. There was also the logic of multiple simultaneous spaces. The ICC could host dozens of events at the same time, in different rooms, with different audiences, and without a single sound, leaking from one space to another. Each room was an autonomous capsule, like compartments in a spaceship, an independent microcosm, created to function at maximum efficiency. The interior aesthetics were a separate chapter. Directly inspired by universes such as Star Trek and Star Wars, the ICC's corridors looked like intergalactic tunnels. The metal walls, the cold lights, the curved ceilings, everything evoked the collective imagination of space, the future, the unknown. It was impossible to walk around there without feeling transported. For many visitors, especially in the 1980s, the experience of entering the ICC was as impactful as watching a science fiction film. Only, here, everything was real, everything worked, everything was tangible. It was a type of modernity that could not only be seen, but felt. The entire building seemed to breathe along with the visitors, a futuristic organism made of steel and light. And in the center of it all, the brain glowed silently, as if it controlled every detail of the environment, as if it were alive. During its early years, the ICC was acclaimed as one of the most advanced convention centers on the planet. It hosted international congresses, political forums, medical, technological, and cultural events. Leaders, scientists, artists, and business people from all over the world have passed through its rooms. The West had indeed created something monumental, and it did not let anyone forget it. West Germany, still divided by the wall, used the ICC as a symbol. Every event held there was a reminder that West Berlin was not an isolated corner of the world, but a hub of ideas, innovation, and freedom. It was a showcase for democratic progress in the midst of a geopolitical tension zone. And for a while, this worked. But time is relentless with all promises of eternity. As the 1990s approached, and especially after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, the symbolism of the ICC began to lose its power. Reunification brought new challenges, new priorities. The city, now whole, looked to the future with different eyes. And the steel giant that had once symbolized resistance and avant-garde began to become a burden. Maintaining such a colossal structure was extremely expensive. The internal systems were aging. The needs of the market were changing. The architecture, which had once seemed futuristic, was now considered dated. Too brutal, too cold, too expensive. Maintenance was becoming unsustainable. In the 2000s, the shine began to fade. Events diminished. The once vibrant halls fell silent. And around 2014, the unthinkable happened. The ICC was officially closed. But the building, even though it was closed, was not completely empty. During the migration crisis in Europe, the ICC was used as a shelter for refugees. Thousands of people passed through its halls in search of safety. The space, designed for the future of technology, was transformed into a humanitarian refuge. Later, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it was temporarily reactivated as a vaccination center. Rows of chairs that once sat scientists and leaders now welcomed ordinary citizens seeking protection. At other times, it was used for art exhibitions, alternative events, and audiovisual experiences. Even though it was officially abandoned, the building refused to die. Its structure was still solid, its rooms still impressed, and its symbolism, even though forgotten by some, still pulsated in those who knew it well. But the truth was cruel. Most of the time, the ICC remained empty. A silent colossus in the heart of a city that no longer knew what to do with it. Berliners, when passing by its facade, had mixed feelings. Pride, nostalgia, frustration. It was like seeing an old titan sleeping, powerful but forgotten. Abandonment did not erase its presence. On the contrary, the building seemed even more impressive in silence, as if it were waiting, as if, at any moment, it could awaken again. Despite all the decay, the silence, the years of closed doors, the ICC never stopped being an icon. Not for the residents of Berlin, nor for curious tourists, nor for architects and engineering lovers around the world. It was like a relic of a time when the future was still a concrete promise. And little by little, this memory began to transform into something stronger. Hope. In 2019, the Berlin government finally acknowledged what many already knew. The ICC was a historic heritage site, not only because of its bold architecture, but because it represented a landmark of resistance, creativity, and ambition during the most tense years of the Cold War. From that point on, it could no longer be demolished or modified without strict preservation criteria. It was official. The Titan was protected. But that still didn't solve the essential question: what to do with it? That's when a bold proposal emerged. The city of Berlin launched an international competition to revitalize the building with an ambitious deadline: 2026. The proposal was clear and provocative. Investors would have the right to use the ICC for 99 years, almost a century, but with one non-negotiable condition: its use would be public. No need to transform the building into something elitist or exclusive. The idea was to return the ICC to the population. The ideas began to emerge: a space for innovation, art, technology, education, science, an interactive cultural center, a museum of the future, a new hub of global creativity. The structure was there, intact, waiting for a new purpose, and the enthusiasm returned. Proof of this were the guided tours that took place recently. Places sold out in hours. People of all ages, Berliners and foreigners, wanted to go inside. They wanted to see this architectural legend with their own eyes. They wanted to walk through the metal corridors, see the brain pulsating, step into the room of 5,000. Photos flooded social media. Videos went viral. The ship, as many still called it, seemed to be taking off again this time, heading towards the heart of the 21st century. The most impressive thing was to realize how, even after everything, the building still enchanted. Not out of nostalgia, but out of power. It continued to be different. It continued to be bold. It continued to ask questions, as all good architecture should. The ICC survived the Cold War, political changes, obsolescence, abandonment. And now, faced with a new future, it is about to reinvent itself, like a symbol that refuses to die, like a ship that, instead of falling into oblivion, prepares for a new mission. Deep down, perhaps it has always been this: a space ahead of its time. A reminder that, even in the darkest periods of history, it is still possible to build something great, something that endures, something that inspires. And now that the city is looking at it again, perhaps the greatest lesson from the ICC is this: the giants of the past do not need to be left behind. Sometimes, all they need is a second chance to shine again. If this story touched you, made you think, reflect, or simply surprised you, don't let it stop here. Watch the video now. It shows us that it is worth continuing to bring stories like this. Comment below. What would you do with a building like this? Leave your opinion, your idea, or just share what you felt. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. And if you know someone who loves architecture, history, or simply good stories, share this video. Let's make this giant be remembered by everyone.